The sliding doors of St. Luke's Hospital opened not to a patient, but to a ghost. A German shepherd, his fur matted and dull with desert dust, limped through the lobby like a soldier returned from war. He bore the look of something broken, yet undeterred. One eye was clouded with scarring, and every rib showed through his taut skin. The limp in his step suggested pain, old and lingering. But what truly froze the staff wasn't the dog himself. It was what he carried, dangling from his jaws was a black plastic garbage bag. It swayed as he moved with unsettling purpose, navigating past stretchers and startled patients. Nurse Sarah Mitchell stood behind the triage desk, her clipboard slipping from her hands as the scene unfolded. Security guard Frank Miller fumbled with his radio but never spoke into it. "Get that mutt out of here," someone shouted, but no one moved. The dog made no sound, no growl, no bark, just a steady gait toward the front of the emergency department. When cornered near the nurse's station, he did something no one expected. He gently placed the garbage bag on the tile floor and backed away 3 deliberate steps, eyes never leaving Sarah. Compelled by something she couldn't name, Sarah stepped forward. Ignoring Frank's warning, she crouched and opened the top of the bag with shaking hands. Inside was not trash, not food, not something forgotten or discarded. Inside was a baby, a newborn baby girl, wrapped in a blood-stained towel, her umbilical cord crudely tied off with a shoelace. She was deathly still, her skin tinged with blue. "Oh my God," Sarah whispered, her voice cracking. Chaos erupted. Orders were shouted. Dr. Robert Anderson was paged, but the German shepherd didn't budge. He remained where he was, posture erect, his good eye focused on Sarah and the bundle she cradled. What no one at St. Luke's knew then was that this dog, this scarred stray who appeared from nowhere, had once been a soldier. His name was Max, and 8 years earlier he had served in the 75th Ranger Battalion's K-9 unit in Afghanistan. He had been a hero, trained to detect explosives and save lives. And now, in the searing Arizona heat, he had done something remarkable. Again, this is not just a story about a dog. It's about the people he brought together. A nurse with scars no one could see, a child born into silence, a soldier broken by war, and a mother who loved enough to let go. Stay with us, because this story is just beginning. Max hadn't always wandered the streets of Phoenix like a phantom. Once he had a name that echoed with pride and purpose: Sergeant Max, K-9 Unit, 75th Ranger Battalion. He was not just a military dog. He was a savior in fur, a vigilant protector trained in the heat and blood of Afghanistan. The bond between Max and his handler, Staff Sergeant James Wilson, was forged in a crucible of sand, fire, and loyalty. Together, they had walked into danger more times than either could count. Their work was exacting. Max could smell explosives, buried a foot beneath the earth, trace a man's scent through a market, alert the platoon to danger with a silent signal. James trusted Max more than he trusted his own instincts. In war, that kind of trust could mean the difference between life and death. Max remembered the smells of deployment, boot polish, diesel, the sharp sting of cordite. He remembered the weight of his tactical vest, the gentle scratch behind his ears after a job well done. He remembered James's laugh, low and rare, and the whispered promises to get home safe. But war takes more than it gives, and for Max, it took everything in one terrible moment. It was a routine patrol outside Kandahar. The sun was just beginning to crest the mountains when Max froze, ears back, muscles taut. Something was wrong. He knew it. He tried to signal James, but the warning came a breath too late. The explosion tore through their convoy like a scream, made of fire. Max was thrown 20 feet, his body slamming against hard ground. He blacked out to the sound of human screams, metal twisting, and the smell of burning flesh. 2 soldiers died instantly. James was critically injured. Max, unconscious, was recovered hours later by medics combing the site. He awoke in a haze of pain and antiseptic. A field hospital, unfamiliar hands. One of them belonged to a woman with auburn hair, who whispered in soft tones as she pulled shrapnel from his side. He didn't know her name, not then. But one day she would change everything. That woman was Sarah Mitchell, a combat nurse on her third tour, driven by a need to help others survive even when she could not save herself. She had been the last human voice Max heard before he was airlifted out of Afghanistan. Despite the Army's promises to reunite Max with James, bureaucratic red tape and logistical errors intervened. James was flown home for extensive treatment. Max, deemed too traumatized for further service, was quietly removed from the program. They told him James would come, that he would wait at the base kennel, and one day James would walk through that door. But the days passed, then weeks, then months. Max's faith, so fierce, so loyal, was chipped away until all that remained was instinct. Eventually, he was flown back to the United States and adopted by a well-meaning but overwhelmed family in Phoenix. They didn't understand the nightmares, the aggression toward fireworks, the way Max flinched at sudden sounds. They expected a pet. What they got was a soldier. And so Max ran. He slipped the leash one hot July morning and didn't look back. What followed were years of survival on the streets. No home, no handler, only memory and instinct. He became known as the ghost dog in working-class neighborhoods, appearing and vanishing like smoke. Some feared him. Others fed him. No one truly saw him. Until Sarah did. 8 years had passed. He was older now, slower, haunted. But that day behind the dumpster at Sunset View Apartments changed everything. Because behind that dumpster, in a torn garbage bag, lay a newborn girl on the edge of death. And in that moment, Max became more than a ghost. He became a miracle. Sarah Mitchell did not believe in miracles. Not anymore. There was a time back before Afghanistan when she might have, when the world still made sense, and the line between good and evil was something you could trace in the sand. But 3 tours, as a combat nurse, had taught her otherwise. Good men died, bad men got promotions, and love, real love, could vanish between one sunrise and the next. She had left for her first deployment engaged to a fellow nurse, a man named Evan who promised he'd wait. He did for a while. But distance and death change people. The person who came home from her second tour wasn't the same woman he'd proposed to. By her third tour, he was gone. A note, a box of her things, and a text that said, "I'm sorry, I can't do this anymore." She'd thrown herself into the work, into saving lives. But war is not kind to the body or the soul. Her final tour ended with a medical discharge after a miscarriage that nearly took her life. No one knew. Not really. She'd told her commanding officer, of course, and the field medics. But the pain, the loss of a child she hadn't even told Evan about, was something she carried alone. Back in Phoenix, she took a job at St. Luke's Hospital. Night shifts in the ER suited her. The chaos, the adrenaline, the familiar scent of antiseptic and blood. It felt more like home than her tiny apartment in Tempe, where the walls were thin and the loneliness louder than any siren. Dr. Robert Anderson, old Bob to the staff, had been the first to notice. He'd pulled her aside one night after. A particularly brutal shift. "You're running on empty, Mitchell," he said, his eyes kind but firm. "You can't outrun grief. Sooner or later it catches up." Sarah respected Bob. He was twice divorced, nearing retirement, and carried the same battle scars she did, just better hidden. They didn't talk about the past much, but in him she found an anchor. A reminder that survival wasn't always pretty, but it was possible. She rented a modest 1-bedroom unit in a faded complex on the edge of Tempe. It had peeling stucco, unreliable plumbing, and a perpetually broken mailbox. But it was hers. It was quiet, save for the occasional yelling neighbors or sirens in the distance. Her mornings blurred into nights, sleep becoming a luxury instead of routine. She existed in a cycle of caffeine, adrenaline, and fading hope. The world kept moving, but Sarah felt stuck, as if time had paused the day she left the war zone and never quite restarted. She walked to work some nights, headphones in, playlist carefully curated to drown out her thoughts. Her eyes always scanned the streets without meaning to, a habit formed in combat. She'd seen the ghost dog once or twice, just a glimpse of a limping German shepherd near the dumpsters or cutting across alleys. Locals called him that. Said he came from nowhere and vanished just the same. She hadn't known then that fate was already drawing their paths together. Outside the hospital, Phoenix scorched under a relentless July sun. The homeless population swelled around the ER entrances, seeking water and shade. Heat stroke cases overwhelmed the underfunded hospital, and Sarah's shift blurred from one crisis to the next. She didn't expect anything different that morning, until the doors slid open and a scarred German shepherd limped in carrying a garbage bag. Even then, her instincts didn't waver. Not at first. It wasn't until she saw what was inside the bag that her hands began to shake. A baby, a newborn. Wrapped in a towel that smelled of blood and fear, blue-tinged skin, shoelace tourniquet, and the eyes of the dog that refused to look away. Sarah had been trained for battlefield trauma. But this was something else. This was deliberate, abandonment, maybe worse. Yet through the chaos, through the paged codes and the gasps and the rushing feet, Sarah saw something she hadn't seen in years. Hope. It stared back at her from the eyes of a half-dead dog and the chest of a barely breathing child. She took command, barking orders, cradling the infant to her chest, guiding her team through the critical first minutes. Dr. Anderson arrived within moments, his voice calm and commanding, and through it all, Max remained, watching. As the child was whisked away to the NICU, Sarah lingered, her eyes locked on the dog. Something about him tugged at a place deep inside her that hadn't felt anything in a long time. For reasons she couldn't name, she reached out a hand, and the dog didn't flinch. He leaned in, just slightly, just enough. And just like that, a scarred soldier and a wounded nurse recognized one another. It would take time to understand how their stories were intertwined. But in that moment, in the cool fluorescent light of an overworked emergency room, Sarah Mitchell, who had long given up on miracles, began to believe again, because some angels come in scrubs, and some come on 4 legs. For the last 3 years, Max had survived the way only a soldier could, by adapting. The streets of Phoenix were no Kandahar, but they carried their own dangers. The heat was merciless, the alleys unpredictable, and kindness, when it came, was rare and fleeting. He learned quickly which blocks were safe, which dumpsters held the best scraps, and which humans to avoid entirely. Max's world shrank to a 6-block radius, stretching from Camelback Road to the edge of Apache Boulevard. His day began before the sun rose. He moved better in the cool dark, his injured leg more cooperative. First stop was a leaky spigot behind a Chinese restaurant. The owners didn't chase him off, perhaps because he never lingered. He drank quickly, quietly, respectfully. Then came patrol. Max checked every corner of his small kingdom, alleyways, stoops, the space beneath loading docks. A veteran of war couldn't afford to let his guard down. Though the gunfire and mortar, shells were gone. Danger still whispered around every corner. Teenagers threw rocks. A delivery truck clipped his hind leg. But he endured. He always endured. Some nights he'd sleep beneath the rusted scaffolding behind Montoya's grocery, lulled by the clatter of shopping carts and the rhythmic hiss of the refrigeration unit. Other nights he curled in the shadows behind Sunset. View apartments hidden beneath overgrown bougainvillea that scratched his ears but shielded his body. People whispered about him, the ghost dog, the warhound. Some said he'd saved a child once. Others believed he was cursed. Max didn't care. He wasn't looking for recognition. He was looking for something else. He didn't know what exactly, only that he was waiting. And then one morning the waiting ended. It was early. The sun had not yet fully climbed the sky, but already the heat pressed against the earth like a warning. Max emerged from beneath Montoya's dock, shaking dust from his coat. He'd slept poorly, Dreams had chased him into wakefulness, dreams of sand and fire, of screaming voices and a scent he couldn't forget. James, his handler's voice haunted his dreams, calling out over the roar of explosions. He needed to move. Routine brought control. Control kept the ghosts at bay, water, patrol, scavenge. He made it halfway through his usual route when the scent stopped him cold. Not food, not another stray. Something different, sharp, metallic, fresh. Blood. Max lowered his body instinctively, ears forward. He moved toward the source, carefully, silently. The alley behind Sunset View was choked with garbage bags, discarded furniture, and the acrid stench of rotting waste. But there, behind the third dumpster, something stirred, a cry. Thin, weak, human. Max approached slowly, his one good eye scanning for danger. The scent intensified. Blood, sweat, milk, birth. A tangle of instinct surged within him, protective, urgent, trained. He found the bag half hidden beneath cardboard, torn, partially open. Inside, wrapped in a threadbare towel, was a newborn. She was impossibly small, her face streaked with dried blood. The umbilical cord was still attached, tied off with a shoelace. Her chest moved in shallow jerks. One arm twitched, then fell still. Max stepped closer. He nudged the towel gently with his nose. The baby whimpered. Something ancient woke inside him. Not just the training, though that guided him too, but something deeper, older, an instinct not bred by handlers or honed by war. It was the instinct to protect. Max took the edge of the plastic bag in his teeth. Carefully, gently, he lifted it. The weight was awkward, shifting with each step. He adjusted, balancing, compensating for his limp. He knew where to go. During his time on the streets, Max had watched the comings and goings at St. Luke's Hospital. He didn't remember much about his own time in military medical tents, but something about the building, its smell, the sound of gurneys rolling across tile, felt familiar. Safe, 20 blocks. That's how far it was from Sunset View, 20 blocks with a baby in his mouth. He took back alleys, avoided intersections. Where he had to cross streets, he waited for lights. People stared. One woman at a bus stop whispered, "That dog's." Carrying something, a mail carrier shouted after him. A skateboard clipped his side. He didn't stop. The baby's cries faded. Max increased his pace, ignoring the pain in his leg, the fire in his lungs. He couldn't lose her. Not now. Not after everything. 6 blocks away, he was almost hit by a taxi. The driver screamed obscenities. Max didn't flinch. 2 blocks. 1. The sliding doors loomed ahead. He waited, watched. An elderly couple exited. The doors parted. Max slipped inside. The rest, they already know. The gasps, the chaos, the nurse with auburn hair who moved with practiced calm. But what they didn't know, what no one knew, was how many times Max had walked past that hospital before. Watching. Waiting. And what he was really waiting for wasn't a place. It was a person. The emergency room at St. Luke's had seen its share of chaos, but nothing like this. As Sarah Mitchell cradled the newborn in her arms, the world around her melted into a blur of motion and noise. Nurses shouted, equipment beeped, a crash cart was rolled into the hallway. But for Sarah, all sound dulled to a single heartbeat, faint, irregular, but still there. Hope was still alive. She didn't yet know the child's name, of course. That would come later. For now, she was just a fragile life, swaddled in blood and trembling breath. And Sarah would be damned if she let her slip away. "NICU now!" she barked. Dr. Anderson took the baby from Sarah's arms with the efficiency of someone who had delivered 100 newborns in war zones and hurricanes. "She's in shock. We need oxygen, warming blankets, and an IV. Let's move." As the staff sprang into action, Max stood motionless by the nurse's station. His body trembled, not from fear but exhaustion. His sides heaved, each breath a shallow rasp. Blood from reopened scars seeped down his leg, but his eyes never left the infant. Frank, the security guard, approached cautiously. "Whose dog is this?" He brought her in, Sarah said without turning. Don't touch him. Frank Sue hesitated, then stepped back. Max blinked once in silent thanks. The hospital team whisked the child through double doors, Sarah at their side. Inside NICU, the temperature was kept warm to protect preemies and vulnerable infants. As Sarah scrubbed in, a part of her mind, one she'd long thought dormant, clicked into motion. Shoelace tourniquet, no hospital tag, umbilical cord uncut. This baby wasn't born in a clinic. Someone delivered her alone. And someone had tried, poorly, to keep her alive. Vitals? Dr. Anderson called. Temps 94. Pulse weak but present. Breathing shallow. Get me warmed saline. And where's the blood work? Sarah worked without pause. Her hands moved. By instinct, swabbing, inserting a tiny IV, placing warming pads along the baby's sides. She spoke softly to the child, though she doubted the infant could hear her. You're okay now, she murmured. You're not alone. Outside the NICU, Max waited. He hadn't moved. Every once in a while, his ears twitched at the sound of hurried footsteps, but he made no attempt to follow. When a janitor passed by and offered water, he sniffed it, then lapped a few mouthfuls. His focus remained on the double doors. Word of the mysterious dog spread through the hospital like wildfire. Nurses snapped photos. A resident live-streamed. A 10-second clip to social media, titling it Guardian Angel with Paws. It went viral within hours. But Sarah didn't notice. Her world had narrowed to a 4-pound infant, and the warmth slowly returning to her skin. Then the baby seized. Code white! A nurse screamed. Sarah sprang into action. They administered anticonvulsants, adjusted the oxygen, monitored the brain activity. After what felt like an eternity, the seizure passed. Stabilizing, Dr. Anderson said, wiping his forehead. Sarah stepped back, breathless. Her hands trembled, not from fear but from the rush of adrenaline. She's a fighter, someone muttered. No, Sarah corrected. She had someone fight for her. She looked toward the doors. Max still waited. They let him inside eventually. Just for a moment. Sarah insisted. She kneeled beside him, hand outstretched. Come on, soldier. Max stepped forward slowly. The NICU nurse hesitated but nodded. Sarah brought him close to the incubator, where the baby now lay wrapped in warming blankets, wires trailing from tiny limbs. Max stared through the plastic, then sat. Just sat. Sarah watched the monitor. The baby's heart rate steadied. That's not possible, whispered a nurse. But Sarah knew better. She'd seen miracles before. Chapter 5. A Hospital on Edge. Word count 1,000 plus. By the time the sun crept to its noon position above Phoenix, St. Luke's Hospital had become a media circus. News vans clogged the staff parking lot. Reporters with wide eyes and wired microphones jostled for space outside the ER entrance. Words like miracle dog and mystery baby flashed across local broadcasts. Inside, things were no calmer. Nurses whispered in break rooms. Doctors refreshed news feeds between patient rounds. And security guards, led by Frank Miller, did their best to hold back the crowd. Sarah Mitchell hadn't slept in 26 hours. She sat in the staff lounge with her head in her hands, a cooling cup of coffee untouched beside her. Her scrubs were wrinkled, and the faint smear of blood still stained one sleeve. But her mind wasn't on appearances. It was on the child, now stabilized, breathing on her own in the NICU, and the dog that had brought her in. Max lay curled. At her feet. He hadn't left her side since the moment he was allowed into the unit. Hospital policy didn't allow animals inside patient care areas, but Dr. Anderson had made an exception, temporarily. You're lucky I'm retiring in 6 months, he'd muttered, signing the temporary waiver. Or I'd be fired by lunch. Now Max slept, lightly. Every sound, every creak of the door caused his ears to flick. Sarah looked down at him, then at her phone. Dozens of missed calls. A voicemail from the hospital administrator, another from the city's health department, and a third from a Phoenix Police Department detective named Marcus Reed. She had no choice but to call back. Detective Reed. the voice answered after one ring. "I was hoping you'd reach out." "What's this about?" Sarah asked, her voice dry. "The baby and the dog." Sarah's grip tightened. "We need a statement from you. And access to the NICU," Reed said. "There's a criminal investigation underway. That baby was abandoned, possibly born in an illegal setting. We've got a lot of questions." Sarah nodded slowly. "I'll cooperate. But the child stays in our care." "Agreed. We're sending an officer to coordinate." The call ended. Sarah leaned back, sighing. Across from her, Max lifted his head. "You brought her here," she whispered. "Now we protect her." In the administration wing, things were less noble. Hospital CEO Leslie Hammond paced her office, flanked by 2 PR advisors and the legal director. "This is a liability nightmare," she snapped. "We've got an undocumented dog, a child with no guardian, and news media circling like vultures." "But the public loves it," the younger PR rep said, scrolling through trending hashtags. "Max is already a hero. People are donating. They want to help." "Fine," Hammond said. "Milk the PR while we can, but we need to control the story. No more interviews, no unauthorized social media." In the background, a TV played footage of Max entering the hospital. The baby's towel still clung to his teeth, a miracle wrapped in fur. Back in NICU, Dr. Anderson made the rounds. He paused at the infant's bedside. Her vitals were steady. Her color improved. She had a name now, Hope, scribbled in temporary ink on a tag above her incubator. "Hope," he repeated to himself. "Seems fitting." Sarah arrived a moment later, clipboard in hand. "She's eating," she said. "Not a lot, but enough." "Good. We're not out of the woods, but she's got a shot." They stood in silence. "You okay?" Anderson asked. "No," Sarah replied. "But I'm here." He nodded. That was enough. A knock came at the door. Detective Reed entered, flanked by Officer Jennifer Oakes. They wore plain clothes, badges around their necks. "Let's talk," Reed said. Sarah led them to a conference room. Max followed. Inside, Reed got straight to it. "We've matched DNA from the baby to a woman named Jessica Turner, 23. She's missing. Last seen near Sunset View Apartments." Sarah's heart thudded. "Neighbors reported screaming 2 nights ago, and we found traces of blood near the dumpster." He slid a photo across the table. A young woman, wide eyes, bruised cheek. Sarah swallowed. "We think the baby was born there, possibly abandoned out of fear." "And the mother?" "Still missing." Officer Oakes leaned. "Your dog, Max, he's been seen near that building before. He may have witnessed something." Sarah frowned. "He's not just a witness, he's the reason that baby is alive. We're not disputing that. But he could also lead us to what happened." Sarah looked down. Max had placed his head on her knee. His eye closed, but his body remained tense. "We'll help," she said, "but we do it on our terms." It was nearly midnight when Detective Marcus Reed received the call. "We found her," the voice on the other end said. "South Phoenix, vacant warehouse. She's alive." Jessica Turner had been missing for over 72 hours. In that time, her baby had been found and saved by a stray dog. Her name was all over local news, tied to headlines she'd never imagined. "Miracle baby. Dog saves infant. Mystery mom missing." When the officers arrived at the warehouse, they found Jessica huddled in the corner of a loading dock, bleeding from her left hand, dehydrated, barely conscious. She was transported to Phoenix Memorial Hospital and sedated shortly after arrival. Sarah Mitchell wasn't on shift when the news broke. She was home, if the small apartment with peeling paint could be called that, trying to rest with Max curled beside her bed. But sleep wouldn't come. When her phone buzzed with an alert she knew before reading it. Jessica Turner, missing mother found alive. She was on her feet in seconds. At Phoenix Memorial, Reed sat outside Jessica's room. She was stable, now awake, and under police guard. He held a legal pad filled with scribbles from her initial interview, and none of it made sense. "She said someone tried to kill her," he told Officer Oakes. "She ran." hid, then passed out. Any names? One, William Prescott, Oakes blinked. The surgeon? Yeah, big shot at Memorial, he's on leave now, but apparently he was Jessica's boss at the private clinic she worked at before going off the radar. Reed looked down at his notes again. She says he assaulted her, got her pregnant, and when she wouldn't go along with his plan to solve it, he tried to silence her permanently. Oak shook her head. You believe her? Reed didn't answer immediately, then quietly, I believe the fear in her voice. Sarah arrived mid-morning. She wore clean scrubs, her eyes tired but focused. She had one request, to see Jessica. Jessica sat upright, IVs trailing from her arms. She looked younger than Sarah expected. Fragile. But there was strength behind the pale. Sarah Mitchell, she introduced. NICU nurse. I've been caring for your daughter. Jessica's eyes filled. She's okay? She's strong, Sarah said. Fighter like her mom. Tears fell. Jessica reached for Sarah's hand. I didn't know what else to do, she whispered. He said no one would believe me, that if I kept the baby I'd lose everything. He tried to inject me with something. Said it would end quietly. I ran. Sarah didn't speak, just listened, just held her hand. I thought I was dying. I didn't mean to leave her like that. I thought maybe someone would find her. I prayed. You didn't just pray, Sarah said. You chose a place close to where Max roamed. You gave her a chance. Jessica nodded slowly. I used to see him sometimes. That dog, always watching. I thought maybe he was meant to find her. He did. That night, Sarah returned. To St. Luke's. Hope slept peacefully. Max sat beside her incubator. She ran a hand along his back. She's not just Hope, Sarah whispered. She's the answer to a scream no one else heard. Max leaned into her hand. They were getting closer to the truth. But they weren't safe yet, because Dr. William Prescott hadn't disappeared and he wasn't done. Detective Marcus Reed had been in law enforcement for over 15 years. He had seen everything. Families torn apart, lies layered in charm, and men who wore suits better than their guilt. But nothing had prepared him for Dr. William Prescott. Respected surgeon, head of pediatrics at a private clinic, a donor to half the hospitals in the valley, and if Jessica Turner's story proved true, a predator hiding behind polished shoes and a polished smile. Reed started digging. The first step was the clinic, Prescott Medical Solutions. It sat in a quiet Scottsdale plaza, all glass walls and tasteful landscaping. Reed and Officer Oakes arrived just after noon. A receptionist greeted them with a rehearsed smile, which faltered when badges appeared. We'd like to speak to Dr. Prescott. He's not here today, the woman said. He's on indefinite leave. Who authorized that? The board, after the media coverage. They said it was best if he stepped away until things calmed down. Reed left his card. Have him call me. Today. As they exited, Oakes whispered. They're protecting him. Reed didn't respond. But his silence said everything. That evening, Sarah sat in her apartment with Max stretched across the living room rug. News played on mute. The world had become surreal. Headlines featuring her, Max, and Hope scrolling across the bottom of the screen. Donations were pouring in. People offered to adopt Hope, to give Max a medal, but none of it mattered if Prescott wasn't stopped. Her phone buzzed. Reed, we need you to look at something. At the precinct, Reed showed her a photo. Prescott and Jessica at a gala event. He zoomed in on Jessica's eyes. They were strained, haunted. She wasn't smiling, not truly. She'd just started working for him, Reed said. 6 weeks. Before she vanished. He slid another photo forward. This one from a traffic cam, Prescott's car parked outside Sunset View Apartments the night before Hope was found. He was there, Sarah whispered, and we think he went back. Her blood was found on his tire. Sarah covered her mouth. We need testimony from Jessica. She's scared, and she trusts you. Sarah nodded. I'll talk to her. Back at the hospital, Jessica was stronger, eating, speaking in full sentences. but her eyes still carried shadows. "I need you to testify," Sarah said. Jessica shook her head. "He'll destroy me. You've already survived him." Jessica looked at a photo taped to the wall, Hope wrapped in a pink blanket. "I can't let him near her, ever." Sarah took her hand. "Then help us make sure he never gets the chance." Across town, in a gated estate, Dr. Prescott poured himself a drink. His hands were steady, his smile was thin. He turned off the news. He didn't like the way people said Max's name, like it meant something more than just a dog. He poured another drink, then picked up his phone. "It's time." "We fixed this," he said. The line clicked. Outside, headlights flickered. Prescott watched them with narrowed eyes, because the hunt had just begun. Chapter 8. Hunted in the Dark. The night air in Tempe was unusually still. No breeze rustled the trees, and even the streetlights seemed to flicker more cautiously, like they too were holding their breath. Inside her apartment, Sarah Mitchell stood, by the window, one hand on the curtain, the other resting protectively on Max's broad shoulders. He had been uneasy all day. It wasn't just the reporters or the calls from the hospital's legal team. It wasn't the flood of strangers who suddenly wanted to interview her or photograph Hope. No, this was something older, deeper, a scent in the air, a shift in tension Max felt in his bones. At 9:23 p.m., Max growled. Sarah froze. It wasn't a bark or a whine. It was low, steady, primal. His ears twitched, his body tensed. And then he moved, not away from the window, but toward it. Sarah turned out the lights. Outside, a black SUV rolled slowly past the apartment complex. Its headlights were off, Detective Reed had warned her. Prescott's not the kind of man who lets things go. Be careful. She had installed a security bar on her front door, bought pepper spray, even considered getting a firearm, but none of it made her feel safe. Not really. Not when a man with power, wealth, and secrets wanted her silenced. Sarah crouched beside Max. "What do you hear?" Max didn't answer, of course, but his eyes never left the window. At 10:05 p.m., her phone buzzed. No caller ID, she didn't answer. A minute later, a text appeared. "You should have stayed out of it." Sarah's breath caught. She called Reed immediately. "I'm on my way," he said. "Lock everything, don't open the door." She checked on Hope. The baby was sleeping soundly in a bassinet beside the couch. Sarah had taken emergency leave and been granted temporary custody, while the court sorted through Jessica's testimony and Prescott's looming indictment. Another growl from Max. Another knock on the door. But this one wasn't from a hand. It was a soft metallic click, the sound of a lock being tested. Sarah grabbed Max's collar and backed toward the hallway. Her heart pounded. Then glass shattered in the back. Max lunged. The man who stepped through the shattered rear window didn't expect resistance. He wore black gloves and moved like someone trained not to be seen, but Max was faster. He struck. The intruder mid-leap, jaws snapping inches from the man's throat. They hit the floor with a crash. The man screamed, kicking, but Max didn't let go. Sarah ran for Hope, cradling the infant against her chest. She dialed 911 with trembling fingers. "Home invasion. 2820 East Vista Drive, armed intruder." The man flung Max off with a punch to the ribs. Max hit the wall, yelped, but staggered back up. Sarah grabbed a lamp and swung. The man caught it, shoved her aside. Then headlights, red and blue, flashed through the broken glass. Sirens, tires screeching. The intruder bolted for the back, but Max was faster. Reed arrived seconds later, gun drawn. He found the man cornered. In the alley, blood streaming from a gash on his shoulder. Max held his ground, growling. "Drop it," Reed ordered. The man froze. Hands went up. Backup arrived. Handcuffs clicked. Max limped to Sarah, nudging her hand. She was crying now, but not from fear. From rage, from relief. 2 hours later, the man had a name. Derek Lean. Private security. Employed by a company Prescott had quietly invested in last year. "Want to guess who signed his paycheck?" Reed said. Sarah didn't answer. She was holding Hope. Max rested at her feet, bandaged but alert. "Prescott won't stop," she said quietly. "Not unless someone stops him first." Reed nodded. "Then let's make sure we do." Chapter 9. Truth and Testimony. The day of the preliminary hearing arrived under a heavy desert sky, clouds rolling over Phoenix like silent witnesses. Outside the courthouse, camera crews jockeyed for position, aiming their lenses at the building, where the truth would finally be told. Inside, Jessica Turner sat beside her attorney, pale but resolute. She wore a plain blouse, her hair pinned back, and held tightly to a photo of Hope, a printout Sarah had given her just days before. Sarah was there too, waiting in the gallery. So was Max. He had been granted special permission to attend, a comfort animal for Jessica, a living symbol of the case's most unbelievable chapter. He sat alert beneath the bench, every few moments glancing toward the entrance. Prescott arrived just past 9 a.m., surrounded by lawyers and PR handlers. He wore navy blue and a smirk, as if the entire proceeding were an inconvenience. He did not look at Jessica. But she looked at him, and she didn't flinch. Detective Reed was the first to take the stand. He walked the court through the timeline, Jessica's disappearance, the evidence from the crime scene, the break-in at Sarah's apartment, and most damning of all, the connection between Derek Lean and Prescott's private holdings. Mr. Lean was paid through a shell company owned by a trust linked to Dr. Prescott, Reed said. The transfer was traced back 2 weeks before the attempted home invasion. Prescott's attorney objected. "Sustained," the judge said. But the point had landed. Next came the forensic evidence. Jessica's blood on Prescott's car tire, security footage showing him near Sunset View Apartments, and prescription, records linking him to an unlicensed sedative found in her bloodstream. But the turning point came when Jessica took the stand. She shook as she approached the witness chair. Sarah mouthed words of encouragement from the bench. Max's eyes followed her every move. Jessica took a breath, then spoke. She told them everything. How she was hired by Prescott's clinic. How he began singling her out. First compliments, then late-night texts. How she turned him down, and how his attention turned to threats. The night she found out she was pregnant. The night he offered her money to take care of it. And then how he came to her apartment, with a syringe. "I ran," she said, voice cracking. "I didn't know where to go. I made it as far as the alley. I thought I was dying. I just wanted her to live." Silence fell over the courtroom. Prescott's lawyer grilled her, trying to poke holes. But Jessica didn't waver. Not once. "She's alive," she said, tears in her eyes. "Because of a dog. Because I still had something. Worth protecting." The judge recessed for deliberation. When he returned, his voice was clear. "Based on the strength of testimony, evidence presented, and the clear danger posed by the defendant, I am remanding Dr. William Prescott without bail pending formal trial." Gasps. Cameras flashed. Prescott's mask cracked. Sarah hugged Jessica in the hallway. Max leaned against them both. "I didn't think I could do it," Jessica whispered. "You already did," Sarah said. "The moment you survived." That night, as Phoenix exhaled under a starless sky, the three of them sat together outside the hospital. Max lay with his head in Jessica's lap. Hope slept beside them in a carrier. They were not whole, but they were healing. And that was enough. For now. Six months later, spring arrived in Arizona, not with flowers or rain, but with the mercy of cooler mornings. At St. Luke's Hospital, a small ceremony was held on the front lawn. The media were kept at bay for once, and the cameras stayed off. This was for them, for Hope, for Jessica, for Sarah, and for Max. A plaque was unveiled near the hospital entrance. It bore a simple inscription, "In honor of Max, soldier, survivor, savior." Max sat beneath the plaque, now graying around. The muzzle, but no less proud, his vest bore a new patch. Service animal, retired. Sarah knelt beside him, her hand brushing the fur between his ears. Jessica stood a few feet away, holding Hope in her arms. The baby gurgled softly, blinking in the golden light. They had moved into a shelter first, then into transitional housing. With help from donations and legal assistance, Jessica was rebuilding, slowly, day by day. She had enrolled in community college, started therapy, and began volunteering at the same hospital that once held her daughter's life in the balance. Sarah had changed too. She no longer worked only night shifts, no longer buried herself in chaos. She and Max had moved into a larger apartment. She'd even started teaching CPR and trauma nursing on weekends. But the biggest change came not in what they did, but in how they saw the world. Not as something to survive, but as something to protect. Hope giggled. Max barked once, playfully, softly. "She's getting loud," Jessica laughed. Sarah nodded. "Good, she has a voice." They sat together beneath the plaque, not speaking for a long time. People passed. Some smiled. Some stopped and read the inscription. Most walked on. But one boy, no older than 10, crouched beside Max. Did he really save a baby? Jessica smiled. Yes, he really did. The boy stared at Max in awe, then reached out gently. Max allowed it. That moment, small and quiet, was the kind that stories never seem to capture. The kind that heals without anyone noticing. Hope squirmed. In Jessica's arms, Sarah reached for her. "Let me," she said. "It's my turn." As she held the baby close, Max lay at their feet, ever watching, ever guarding. Some heroes wear uniforms, some wear fur, and some bring hope wrapped in a garbage bag and leave the world a little brighter than they found it.